In this video, our major aim is to look upon the contribution of climate change, human development and their combination to the future state of global water resources. First of all, a question arises. Why? Why we concerned about water resources even though amount of water never diminishes, it is circulated in closed hydrological cycles. A common explanation to this is even though a lot of water is present on earth, only 2.5% is fresh water, and because as most of the water is stored as glaciers or deep groundwater, only a small amount of water is accessible. In the present scenario, global warming due to enhanced greenhouse effect is likely to have significant effects on the hydrological cycles. The hydrological cycles will be more intensified with more evaporation and more precipitation or major alteration in timings of wet and dry seasons. The second assessment report of IPCC warned that global warming would lead to increase in both floods and droughts. Many aspects of environment, economy and society are dependent upon water resources, and changes in the hydrological resources and changes in hydrological resource bases have potential to severely impact upon environmental quality, economic development and social well-being. In the most general term, there are both supply side and demand side pressure faced by water. The supply side pressure include climate change, which reduces or increases water availability. It also includes environmental degradation, where for example pollution reduces the available water for use. Demand side pressure include population growth and concentration, leading to increased demands for domestic, industrial and agricultural water, increased environmental demands and effect of changes in the way demands for water are managed. Climate change may affect the demand side balance as well as supply side. In 1997, the United Nations published a comprehensive review of the freshwater resources of the world. The assessment highlighted the effects of increasing population and economic development on water resource availability. It estimated that approximately one-third of world's population currently lives in countries experiencing moderate to high water stresses, and forecasted that by 2025 as much as two-thirds of a much larger world population would be under stress conditions simply due to rise in population and water use.
Okay, it was a nice introduction to this topic. Moving into my part of the narration. Basically, I will be talking about the present day scenario of water uses and what can be some obvious change in this scenario in recent future. At the global scale, the largest user of water is irrigated agriculture. It represents a major part of the freshwater withdrawals, that is up to 70% of the usable freshwater sources. Industrial uses account for 22% of the globally through manufacturing and particularly thermoelectric power generation. Much of the cooling water is in fact returned to the water system at higher temperature. Domestic, municipal and service industry use accounts for just 8% of global water use. The proportions of water used in each sector by country, however, can vary considerably around these global estimations. So now I will be talking about several factors influencing the growth of future water resources use. First, population growth. An increase in population means greater demand for water. Population concentration. Population, particularly in larger cities in the developing countries, are becoming increasingly populated. So this has mainly two implications. First, water use is different in an urban environment than in rural environment. For example, water will be supplied through a pipe network, so more is used than in rural areas and water is lost through leakage. Second, the increasing concentration of demand means greater pressure on resources in specific areas. The third important point I will be talking about is industrial change. Industrial development increases the demand for water. But a point to be noted here that through industrial restructuring may reduce the demand for the water up to some extent. As water is seen as more of an economic good, it will be used more efficiently in industry. Here comes the most important point, that is the expansion of irrigation. The growth is in irrigated areas will lead to more uses by agriculture, but this may be offset to certain extent by improvements in irrigation efficiency. More generally, increased water use efficiency and demand management measures will bring down domestic, municipal and service industry demands, particularly in Western countries.
From now, I am going to talk about effect of climate change on hydrological regimes at the global scale, change in the water balance. The climate change scenarios used in the assessment have a geographically variable change in precipitation, like high altitude, equatorial and some subtropical regions have an increase. Mid-latitude and some subtropical regions have a decrease, and a general increase in temperature. Potential evaporation as calculated by the Penman-Moët formula increases to by the average of 7.5 to 10% by the year of 2020s and 13 to 18% by 2050s and 19 to 17% by 2020s. The change in runoff from HAD-CM3 GGA1, however, has a rather different pattern to those from the HAD-CM2 scenarios. Runoff reduces considerably across the Amazon basin and across much of the United States. In contrast, runoff increases under HAD-CM3 across Southern Asia and particularly across the Indian subcontinent. The difference in runoff patterns largely reflected the difference in precipitation change patterns, but increases in potential evaporation also tend to be generally higher under HAD-CM3. Potential evaporation is higher under HAD-CM3 for several regions. The temperature increase is greater in many regions. The vapor pressure increases in generally smaller, leading to a greater increase in vapor pressure deflects. Wind speeds are slightly higher and the patterns of the net radiation change are different, reflecting the different spatial patterns of precipitation change. Change in snowfall. A rise in temperature generally means that less precipitation falls as snow. Although the absolute amount of snow may increase if precipitation increases during the winter season. Across the large part of North America, northern China and eastern Europe, snow cover by the end of winter has been considerably reduced by the 2050s. This has implications for the timing stream flow through the year as indicated in the next season. In Southern Asia, however, extra winter precipitation leads to increase in March snow cover. Now, the change in monthly runoff regimes. Both the southern English and Italian cells are influenced by the maritime climates. By the 2050s, there is a little change in the timing of flows throughout the year. In southern England, however, the seasonal range is increased. The extreme illustrates the effect of the rise in temperature on snow cover. Snow melts begins in March rather than April, and the spring snowmelt peaks is considerably reduced. Further east in western Russia, and the temperature has less effect on the timing of snowmelt. So the timing of the flow remains is little altered.
We are moving to our conclusion part. How will water use change in future? The global population water will certainly grow at least for several decades, and water demand will increase as a result. Water demand per person will most likely also increase due to economic growth. For example, as expected growth of meat consumption will increase the water demand for the production. The ultimate objective of future-oriented world water resources assessments are to show the international community what will happen if we continue to manage our water resources as we do today, and to indicate what action may be needed to prevent undesirable outcomes. In that sense, study of the future water resources are successful in some prediction based on the business as usual as proven wrong. In line with this, plausible scenarios informed by past experience and current trends are built for the future projection of the demand side. In the agriculture sector, which is estimated to withdraw 2/3 of world's water withdrawal and which accounts 90% of total water consumption in the world in the period from 1961 to 2004. Crop yield per area increased by a factor of 2.3, more than the rate of population growth, and the total crop yield increased by a factor of 2.4, even though the area of crop increased by only 10% and harvested area increased less than 24. This phenomenal growth was a large extent due to doubling the irrigation area and corresponding increase of water withdrawal for irrigation. In addition to increased usage of fertilizer, domestic per capita water has increased with domestic product growth, but in many development this increase seems to have come to an end. In some countries, domestic per capita income was used to now decreasing. Such trend shift be considered in prediction of future water use. Industrial water use has also increased along with GDP, but recycling technology has reduced the net intake of water for factories. For example, 80% of water used in the industry sector in Japan is currently recycled. There are concerns that decades ahead water withdrawal for irrigation can be increased as required, and that of lack of water will impede necessary growth of food production. However, in developing countries is generally low, which means that they should have potential to increase their water withdrawals. A key challenge for these countries should have implement soft measures, policies and market mechanism, in addition to technical ones to simultaneously increase the supply of and manage the demands wisely. What are the effects will climate change have? Heading to our last part, we will discuss now how can hydrological science help solve world water issues. Detailed knowledge of global water resources certainly has been enriched over 40 years that have passed this international hydrological decade. Water cycle on Earth can now be measured and simulated on finer temporal and spatial scale, with detailed model of each hydrological process, and the current and future status of the global water system can be illustrated. In contrast to this achievement in studies of the natural hydrological cycle, data about the social aspects of water use are not easily available. Finally, the future development of hydrology requires improved communication between scientists and policy makers to ensure the hydrological expertise is translated into action that address water challenges, and to make sure that scientists understand what kind of knowledge are required by the policy maker and by society at large.